have really no clear idea yet of what causes the FBI to do the Samurai Act on Gordon Fox. Okay, so we're left again to baselessly speculate. So the initials PEDP come roaring back to us. Now, if I have this straight, Gordo was doing closings for PEDP. Now, PEDP is essentially the Providence. If you can imagine this, Providence had its own version of EDC. Yikes.
Yeah, what a great idea.
Well, I guess actually during the Buddy Cianci regime, a lot of aggressive financing was created and made available for restaurants. And in large part, one can tie part of the restaurant boom in the state to Cianci's aggressive pursuit of financing what was then considered the unfinanceable. I mean,
P.O.'s House of Munch.
Yeah, too much.
He also aggressively went after his ex-wife's lovers.
Well,
that's neither here nor there, I suppose.
There's that.
And under the table campaign donations as well.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well,
Never convicted.
Never convicted.
That's true.
He was convicted of a conspiracy on crimes he wasn't convicted of. So, flash forward to the Cicilline regime. The cleaner, open air, sunny Providence bet. You had a couple of things going on. First of all, the federales have come down hard on the city of Providence for undocumented loans. Blah, 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 blah. Now, I guess in Gordo's case, he's been tied to a loan made by someone who shockingly claimed a false business address for a construction company. Now, there weren't supposed to be loans going to construction companies, and you're supposed to have a legitimate address here in Providence. Ironically, my sources tell me that we're sitting in the address right now that the woman used, which again leads me to our Facebook picture for today, which is 3 stories below us. There actually is a direct portal to hell. All right, I've shown you the pictures. If you go there, open the door. I believe it's the 7th circle.
Yeah, let's just say we're all happy the elevator is fixed, so we can just bypass it altogether.
I was getting the, or to quote Haley Joel Osment, when I go past that floor now, I see dead people.
I got the heebie-jeebies.
Right. So allegedly, purportedly, supposedly, indefinitely, there was a loan made in which Gordo was involved in. We don't know that to be true yet because outside of this room, you're innocent until proven guilty. Okay? So but some of the fallout from that, does this have the potential to reach into our current congressman from the 1st Congressional District's office? Anyone? Opinions? Speculation?
I think that this thing, once it breaks, has legs for days. I think you're going to see quite a few very prominent names attached to this investigation. My only question is, it's tough in Gordon Fox's position. When you're at the top of the food chain, guess what? When the feds come calling, there's nobody to roll over on.
Right.
So that puts him. It all goes uphill at that point, and if the feds come calling anywhere down the ladder,
they're going to
I guarantee
sing.
Exactly. There's going to be people rolling over left and right on whoever they can to save their own skins.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will emerge from this with their skins intact but badly bruised.
Well, tie this into the mayoralty. Now, right now, in an unrelated story, the tide seems to be swinging against the fallen angel in a couple of cases. First of all, for no apparent reason whatsoever, because the man is barely able to string together a sentence or a coherent thought, Clay Pell is gathering significant endorsements, both, I guess, originally from the Nurses Union and now the NEA.
Which NEA?
The
Arts or education?
No, education. Okay. From Rhode Island NEA. For no apparent reason. I mean,
they like his name.
They like his name, and they must like. I can't even imagine. So now you have this. On top of that, let's tie in. You've got the potential for Anthony Solomon to be dragged into this because the question begs.
Michael Solomon.
I'm sorry, Michael Solomon.
I was going to say,
Anthony was the dad. Anthony was the pharmacist treasurer. All right. Who started the ball rolling on a lot of other great things here. So Michael Solomon owns a restaurant, and again, unsubstantiated reports to me indicate that the restaurant he bought, he also assumed troubled financing from this same PEDP, and allegedly has yet to make a significant effort to repay it while simultaneously loaning his campaign hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is the story du jour on the streets, the mean streets of Providence. Does he get pulled into this in terms of guilt by association with the fallen angel star suddenly starting to decline in terms of potential for governor, is it too late for the fallen angel to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to stick around. I'm going to be treasurer after all, thus quashing the hopes of one Brett Smiley. Brett, we're going to tax every gun, Smiley. It's the domino effect from this, again, is staggering. Absolutely staggering up and down the political landscape. What do you guys think?
This is a very exciting moment to be a wise guy on the radio.
Yeah.
Let's just face
I have
it.
to admit, I've had a lot of fun on Twitter over the last couple of days.
Well, I mean, let me just throw this out there. There's two types of people in the world. There's that type of individual who is a reflective, emotionally mature personality who will sit back and look at the events of the day and really try to assess what the long-term approach would be. Then there's the Weisenheimer who just, let's just blow it all up. Yeah, okay, we know where we all... Chris is the mature one.
But here we are in Rhode Island where everybody has their hand in everybody else's pockets. So things have the potential to get very ugly and very entertaining for those of us sitting in the cheap seats.
So on that note, do you guys want to hear my
of course
wild speculations
absolutely.
and
Please.
conspiratorial-minded theories?
And by the way, for one thing, for the record, this is the opinion of the coalition and, in a sense, station management. It is meant both.
Station management doesn't have an opinion.
Right. And this is meant both for your entertainment and educational purposes.
And just to kind of get the gears going up in the old cabeza.
Yeah.
So, given that Mattiello was so fast out of the gate to throw his hat in the ring for the speaker, okay, my thought was he must have had an inside track on what was coming down the pipe for Gordo. Okay? And if that was the case, because he threw his hat in the ring so quickly, he either A, knew that his hands were clean, which is probably unlikely.
Well, his hands
or
are clean
B,
perhaps about this issue.
He's the guy that rolled.
I saw that thought somewhere else as well. That's a good possibility. Although I'm not convinced Mattiello had to know something to be quick on the draw. He may have been waiting for Fox to misstep somewhere so he could pounce.
I think that's probably the case, yeah.
But it is possible he's heard something coming down the pipe.
But this is what I've been doing all weekend. It's
Right.
again, wild speculation.
Yeah. I suspect there might be something connecting this to 38 Special. Because we know that there's been some sort of low-level investigation going on behind the scenes. We've been told there was nothing yet that anybody could act on. Then suddenly, out of the blue, this pops up.
Let me throw out two names, and you guys tell me what you think impact will have on their careers. Number one, Dawson Hodson.
He could really come out smelling like a rose on this thing.
As even though he has that dreaded R next to his name, he looks legit now. He looks like a reformer. But this also bodes for someone deciding as an opportunist to throw their hat in as a Republican in primary Dawson.
I would hope that the Republican Party would be smart enough to not do that.
They have other races that need good candidates.
That need a pulse.
Like every race.
Yeah.
and you know, I see in Hodgson, I see the kind of classic Rhode Island Republican, a la Ron Makeley, John Chafee,
right?
You know, the fiscally conservative, like socially, or as P.O. puts it, socially cool,
right?
Republicans. Right. And we have, honestly, a long history of those type of Republicans here in the state, and I see him as kind of the next logical progression of that.
Right. If this doesn't send the shockwave across the state that says that we need someone, you know, where have you gone, Dawson Hodson? Rhode Island cries as lonely eyes for you. I mean, this screams for him. The second person, let's just say Mattiello loses. Ruh-roh. What happens to Mattiello, and what other politicians, and because you could have the prospect of midterm, everything getting thrown up like 52-card pickup in the State House. Mattiello loses. What happens to committees? What happens to personalities? Who loses the most?
Well, for the people of Rhode Island, first and foremost. So while we were chatting on the phone last night, I mentioned that, you know, I think that the smart thing to do for either camp. Now, whether or not they're going to do the smart thing, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, well, I would not assume any such thing.
The smart thing would be to just leave the committee chairs. I mean, we're halfway through the session here. We're coming up on crunch time when they really start to let the legislation fly. The smart thing to do would be to leave the chairs where they are. Like, not mess around with any of that stuff, because these guys don't want to be in the House in the middle of July either. So hopefully they have the good sense to say, okay, well, even if there is a big shift in leadership in the House, I think the smart money is keep the chairs where they are, and we can revisit them come next session.
But some of these people hate each other.
Yes, they do.
I mean,
that's kind of too bad. Maybe they'll have to act like adults for a few months.
But if you I'm going to take devil's advocate. I'm going to put myself in the role of a political progressive who has seen their legislation, with the exception of marriage equality, go down in flames for a generation. Open government, all those issues, and the very criminals who have been a roadblock to that are the people in power. Do you want them in power another day? Is the Marcello and Blazewski strong enough to keep those people in a position of power and still marshal the legislation that they want to see take place? Is that possible?
Well, I think if from what I've been reading, if the votes are that close, you will see. Let's say Mattiello DeSimone take leadership. You're going to see very, very strong opposition from at least... Now, Marcello's claimed that he has 33 votes. 33 votes in the Rhode Island House that's a pretty hefty caucus.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a lot of folks.
Absolutely.
So, if there's going to be this bifurcation of the House along these lines, I would assume that there's going to be quite a bit of pushback on either side to any type of legislation, whether it's going to be our class of, our closeted Republicans masquerading as Democrats,
the dinos,
or the progressive caucus in the House. They have to work together. But I would hate to see this devolve into what we see at the national level, which is just obstructionism, basically from both sides,
and obstructionism for its own sake.
Yeah.
I think we might find that some of the people on the losing vote will have done enough back talk behind the scenes to modify what happens. There'll be a handful of people who will go to one side or the other and say, hey, I have to vote in so-and-so's caucus, but it's for this reason or that reason. I owe him a favor, blah, 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 blah. I'm not hostile to you, because they're going to be trying to play both ends against them.
Yeah. Or they have some little piece of pork or some little grant that they want to bring back home for when they go knocking on doors.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
Yep.
Who are Mattiello's primary lieutenants?
DeSimone, Helio Mello. Mello's not quite as conservative, but he's also the chair of the House Finance Committee, which is arguably the most powerful committee in
and why
important committee.
Very, very early on, his name was floated and then disappeared. You're right. House Finance. That's everything.
Nothing goes on paper until it goes through that committee.
Right. So why isn't he in the same conversation as, or arguably, if not for Mr. Speaker, then Senate Majority? Or is he carved out? Is he one of these wonks that sort of carved out a fiefdom running House Finance and is willing to just stay out of the fray?
Well, and that could very well be it too. Maybe he just said, "Look, I don't want it. I don't want the seat. I don't want the speaker's seat." And could anybody really blame him? I mean, you're constantly, people are just pump action shotgun with the trigger tied down.
Well, and you wonder if someone like Mello would be wise to abstain, because when you talk about midstream corrections like this, arguably the most difficult position to change over midstream, literally right in the middle of a term, would be House Finance.
Absolutely.
All right. So does he then abstain, if we're just speculating, and say, hey, I'm the Switzerland of the House Committee. I'm staying neutral. You guys work it out. Meanwhile, I'm going to worry about the people of the state of Rhode Island. Interesting
enough, when Gordon Fox ran at the beginning of 2013 session, there were 3 abstentions from that vote. So it's not guaranteed. I mean, maybe that whole third faction of Democrats is going to abstain from voting so that they can play both sides against the middle.
Yeah,
you know?
that could well happen.
This is the ultimate on-the-record